Hi there, Steve Kaufman here again, talking about language learning. If you enjoy these videos, please subscribe. So, my language learning experience right now is, of course, Greek. I don't have as much time to spend on it as I would like, but that's what I'm focusing on. I do listen to some material, sometimes in Czech or Ukrainian or Russian, but fundamentally I'm focused on learning Greek. And I'm going to be sharing with you my experience in starting from scratch. This is not a related language, although I at first said there were very few words common to words that I knew in other languages. As I get further into Greek, I'm finding more and more words that I can recognize, but it's still not going to be more than 10%. So it's a challenge, and there are some unique things in the grammar, and of course, all new or mostly new vocabulary. What am I doing? Mostly I'm listening and reading. Not surprising to those of you who follow my podcasts. I'm doing a lot of these stories. I think you're aware that we've got this mini story project. We're up to 30 stories in Greek, or 29. And I think we have 34 of them written in English. I find them very clever, little witty anecdotes from life. Two different points of view, and then some questions. And I'm finding that is powerful in terms of my Greek learning when coupled with, the functionality that we have at LingQ and some of these activities, the 4 activities that come at you randomly. So it's a bit of a gamified situation to help sort of zoom in on the words that you've just come across in a new lesson. Anyway, it's all working very well. So, and by the way, I'm going to put in the description box here a link to my blog post where I outline the basic concepts behind these 100 mini stories that we hope to translate into as many languages as possible, and we will have them freely accessible to anyone. Initially, where we have languages, those languages at LingQ, they'll go into our library at LingQ. But I'm also hoping to increase the amount of content we have for other languages so that we might then add these languages to LingQ. We are, in some languages, Portuguese and Spanish, we have a lot of volunteers. We don't have any volunteers, I think, so far, or maybe have one in French, Chinese, and Japanese, seem to be quite weak. So I would welcome any participants who are native speakers of those languages. I may even do a video in those languages to encourage people. However, so the focus is input, as always. Now, the other day I was at a Greek restaurant. I went there specifically to see if I could use some of what I had learned. I went there after my hockey. Then I went for a light lunch. And so of course, I got a very positive reaction from the waitress. But I found that I was unable to remember even some of the basic words like there and here and stuff. But that's fine. That's expected. It's not like I had a major conversation. I just trotted out a few words, got a positive reaction, discovered things that I thought I could say and I couldn't say. But it's very encouraging because it then makes me even more motivated to go back to my listening and reading. So, during this period, on Twitter, all of a sudden I get a tweet that Benny Lewis has produced a video where he is talking about the silent period, from what I gather, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, saying that basically, his theory is that you have to speak from day one. So I think it's very interesting that in language learning, we have these very different points of view, and people disagree. And I think it's good that people disagree. I think it's good that we can disagree about something as positive as language learning. There are so many things that people disagree about where they actually get into, fisticuffs or warfare or whatever. In language learning, everyone's keen on anyone who is involved in arguing about what's a better way to learn languages. Anybody like that is interested in learning languages, so that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. And so if we look at some of the different poles here, we have the extreme silent period. There's somebody in Thailand, I think, that ran a school where people weren't allowed to speak for 6 months. At the other end, you have Benny speak from day one. Then you have the people who love grammar, and there was one fellow who said you can learn any language in 4 hours. Farrell, I can't remember his name. And so that if you understand the fundamental concept of how the language works for word order, then you'll be able to speak the language, which I don't believe, not for a minute. But it's fine. Whatever people like to do, as I always say, it's attitude and time. So if you have the good attitude and you put in the time, you're going to achieve good results. However, just in defense of the silent period, I Googled, by the way, silent period, and there's a number of people who are saying that, the underlying, one of the underlying principles for the silent period, although Krashen, I don't think, uses this, but some people say, well, the child that spends the first 2 years just listening, or the year, apparently the child listens in the womb, I don't know, and then eventually starts speaking. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a bit extreme. As someone pointed out, adults actually speak in other languages. Adults are not like the child in that, regard. True enough. But why I prefer, I don't forbid myself for speaking. I'm only too happy if an opportunity presents itself to try and trot out whatever I can trot out, let's say in Greek. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time trying to speak in Greek at this stage because I haven't discovered enough of the language to make that a valuable, to me, experience. It would have the value of stimulating me, probably motivating me, but if I have an hour to spend, I would rather spend that hour trying to ingest more of the language. And so, the kinds of things that I'm doing now, I'm listening to those many stories, some of which I have listened to and read more than 10 times. So that many of those phrases that I have read and listened to many times and reviewed in our various activities, when I start to speak, those phrases are going to come out because they're in there somewhere. And I'm enjoying doing that. If I spent an hour talking to someone in Greek at this stage, we would not cover many words. In other words, the language content would be very limited. Whereas in the stories that I'm reading, I'm covering a lot of language content. I'm acquiring a lot of vocabulary. As I say, well over 1,000 words known, and I don't know, 3,000 or 4,000. I don't remember words that I have saved that I'm in the process of learning. And I then go, for example, to my living language books, and I jump ahead into their different grammar explanations so that as I come across different forms of the verb, for example, or the genitive or the accusative in my listening and reading, I'm increasingly conscious of what those forms are. I still can't really trot out or, repeat the correct conjugations of all these verbs, but I have a sense of what these are, and so I encounter them more and more. I occasionally review these grammar explanations. I go back to listening and reading, and so I'm just gradually acquiring the language. And when I'm at a point, and I don't know when that will be, where I feel that maybe a half-hour conversation with someone is going to help me, I'm going to do it. I mean, I could do it now, but there's no urgency. So I guess the point is, I think to have a system where you absolutely forbid people from speaking, and especially if you're in the country like Thailand, I don't understand that. It may work for some people, but if I had a school in Thailand, I wouldn't say, don't speak Thai. You're surrounded by Thai-speaking people. It's only natural that you would want to try to learn or to speak or to use whatever you've learned. Here, if I in fact will deliberately go to a Greek restaurant in order to trot out a few words of Greek over lunch. But it's not a necessity. It's not a requirement. And as to when I decide to come out and speak, it'll be my choice, and I don't think it really matters. I don't think there should be pressure to produce right away, nor should you be forbidden from speaking. And just focus on doing the things that you enjoy doing. And I believe, because the issue is not what can you say in the language after 1 week or 2 weeks or 1 month. That's almost irrelevant. It's a bit of a tortoise and hare situation here. The question is, what will you be able to do in the language after 6 months? What will I be able to do when I visit Crete in October? That's what I'm concerned about. Not how successfully I can engage a waitress in a restaurant here in Vancouver in Greek. So there you have it, a bit of a discussion of the silent period versus speak from day one versus people who think who like to try to master the grammar, who see the sort of logic of the language. I mean, all of these things are there. Everyone has to try to find the learning approach that they find most enjoyable, and therefore that will keep them on task. And for me, that's largely listening and reading, as you've heard me say many, many times. Thank you for listening, and check out the description of our mini story project, which I'm really, really excited about based on my experience with the Greek version. Bye for now.